welcome to Season 6, Episode 238 of School Librarians United. I'm your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian starting my 17th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. I'd like to extend a very special welcome this week to listeners Tim in Mexico, Kay in California, James in Colorado, Bonnie and Carrie in Florida, Gina in Maryland, Katie in Michigan, Maggie in New York, Lori in Oregon, and Patricia in Texas. I am always grateful to get feedback from listeners, especially in the form of emails, because I am able to take those recommendations, those suggestions, and really work with them and sometimes spin those off into episodes, and it really helps drive content. But something that reminded me, and one of our listeners reached out and asked for that Editable PD Certificate. And I'll tell you what, friends, this goes back probably to the beginning of Season 2, but I'll never forget, I got a DM in Facebook from a listener in Texas who said, hey, we can use listening to your podcast as professional development. Do you have a certificate? And I was like, well, I do now. And I whipped something up very quickly. And the link is always in the show notes. And I appreciate that it is sort of amateur hour in creating a certificate. On the other hand, if all your administrators need is some documentation that you listen to podcast episodes for PD credit, that's fantastic. So first of all, that link is always in the show notes. It's editable. Please, use and distribute as you see fit. Also, the link to all the playlists, and the playlist is sort of just a glorified Google spreadsheet, which allows me to keep running lists of themes and concepts for which we have episodes. And from what I'm hearing, a lot of people find that platform very sort of user-friendly and very easy to sort of direct their listening. Another thing that I wanted to mention, I will also include the presentation I gave in Rome, which is about podcasts as professional development. If you are interested in talking to your administrators about using podcast listening to get PD, using little air quotes, credit, by all means, reach out to me. The answer is always yes. I've always been enthusiastically supporting anybody who wants to use these free, fully customizable, and convenient on-demand learning that you can do when you listen to podcasts. So yes is always the answer. I did have something fun today, and I'll include a link in the show notes, and that is a link to the School Library Journal's article, School Librarian Back-to-School Hacks for 2023-24. And I was asked to contribute two things. First of all, something new that I want to try this school year, and something that helps me stay positive. And the really exciting thing is there were 12 school librarians who contributed to this. I was one of them. And it should come as no surprise, but there were a couple former guests who were also included in this episode, Dr. Steve Tatro, as well as Karina Kilantan Garza and Tamara Cox. And I also cited Dr. Kay O'Doney, who has been on the show, in my contribution because she inspires me. So yeah, that was a lot of fun, and I'll include a link in the show notes. Friends, I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is @LMS_United, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. Be sure to listen to episode 224. I announce a new sponsorship with Literati Book Fairs. And now a chance to hear from Kathi, a Literati Book Fair veteran. Kathi Edwards, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you for having me again.
Friends, I'm so grateful to Kathi. She's a Literati Book Fair veteran, and I know you're gearing up for the beginning of your school year, but you are already expecting a box from Literati. Your book fair is not for another month. Tell me, you get a box in advance. What kind of goodies are coming in this box?
Oh, so many goodies to get me and my kiddos excited about the book fair. I always love seeing it. It's this big, beautiful box. You can't miss it. So you know where it's coming from and you know what it's got. And when you open it up, there are all the flyers for your students that you get to send home that advertise the theme for the year and also have all the good books that they're going to sell. And I love opening the box up and taking those out and flipping through it and geeking out over the books and getting excited about it. There's bookmarks in there that you can put out in your library to help get the students excited. Like, oh, it's coming. When's it coming? Look at the bookmark. It'll tell you. There's a sign you can set up that talks about Literati and what Literati does in addition to the book fairs, the book subscription service that they offer. And I believe that's it, but that's all you need because, and there's posters. Oh my goodness, how can I forget the posters? There's posters. And they have the covers and the characters, and they send you plenty. I think I can hang one on each grade level hallway, one by the front office, one by the cafeteria, and I think one outside my door. So all I have to do is fill in the dates and information for my book fair, but it's got the cool colors and the characters, and it gets the kids' attention and gets them talking about the book fair like a month before it even is set to start.
Well, and that's so important because there are so many demands on our time, especially at the beginning of the school year. So I know that you have to be able to sort of set time aside to promote for this book fair, but tell me, you also probably need to send some of that messaging out on your school social media, correct?
You do indeed. And I'm sure, like other librarians, I am in charge of our school social media and our school website. So I can kind of commandeer that. And through the open book website that Literati provides for you, they have a ton of ready-to-go graphics and Instagram posts and Facebook posts, and that you could just download and plop in and start getting the buzz going for your parents and your families and even your community members. There's stuff to start trying to get volunteers. I mean, anything you think you need to communicate is there for you to just grab and use, and it's tied in with that theme. So there's really besides grabbing it and posting it, that's all you have to do. There's no creating, no nothing that you have to do.
I love it. Kathi, thank you so much for this insight. I know that it's really helpful, especially to anybody who's not hosted a Literati book fair. Would you come back one more time and talk with listeners about your experience?
My pleasure.
I appreciate it, Kathi. Tune in to learn all about Literati and their very generous offer. Librarians who book their very first Literati book fair for this upcoming school year and mention the code UNITED will receive a $500 gift card from Titlewave. As always, there's a link in today's show notes. And now a word from our sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I am so excited to be working with them. I am grateful to Capstone for their continued commitment to support the podcast in Season 6. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for our episode, Social Media, Rewired for Good, and my conversation with Val DiLorenzo. DiLorenzo, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Amy, for inviting me.
Friends, I am so excited to be sharing this conversation with Valerie today for the simple reason that she and I have crossed paths several times this summer in person, and I knew we needed to share the conversation with the rest of our listening audience. So, Valerie, let's go ahead and give everybody some context. Describe where in the world you work, your current library, what grades you support, and what kinds of programs you offer, because it'll give us listeners a better idea of your job.
Okay. So most people call me Val, and I am the school librarian at Rumsey Hall School, which is a pre-K through ninth grade, junior day, and boarding school. So our youngest boarders are in fifth grade, and we usually have no more than 4. So that's a blessing and a curse that Rumsey is pre-K through ninth grade and that I'm the only librarian because, well, it's a blessing because I get to work with a huge variety of students, right? They're so different, those pre-K kids to those ninth grade students. So I love that. However, sometimes I'm jealous of my colleagues, my librarian colleagues who are a middle school librarian or a high school librarian or an elementary or a 3 to 5 librarian because that's all that they have to focus on. Me, I have to focus on everything. And I also love to read adult books too. So, I mean, it's a blessing and it's a curse. I thought that I would be a high school librarian forever. That's where I started. I taught high school social studies and English before becoming a librarian. I had worked in middle school, so those were my age groups. And when I came to Rumsey Hall, I remember my the director of the lower school was like, well, you've got all this experience with high school and middle school and even community college, but what about elementary? And I said, well, I've got a couple of kids of my own, and I'm always learning. And I looked to my colleagues who knew, they're phenomenal elementary, and I learned quickly, and I love it, and I'm so glad. So, Rumsey is in Washington Depot, Connecticut, which is in the western part of Connecticut. We've been around since 1900. So that's a little synopsis of my school. It's a really special place.
I'm so glad that you're joining us today because I've had the misconception that if you teach at a boarding school, that you live there. I would love to hear a little bit about what maybe makes being a librarian at a boarding school different from one who is, at a traditional school.
That's a great question. So I'm a public school girl. I taught in public schools for years, and the librarian goddesses did their thing, and I ended up here at Rumsey Hall. And a boarding school, so you're right, most faculty members, even some staff members, live on campus. And when you live on campus, you are required to do dorm duty. But in return, you get housing and your meals when we're in session, not when we're on vacations. And then I have the sort of pleasure, I'm 5 miles away, so it's a short ride for me to get to work. And I also do dorm duty. And I don't have to, but I really like it because I get to work with our upper school students in a very different way. And so not everybody could be a teacher at a boarding school. It is really hard, and that's why we have our long vacations, because during the day you're teaching, of course, you're coaching a sport, you are doing dorm duty, and that's not every day, but we really are 24/7 when we're in session. And I feel, even before I did dorm duty, I felt that way. I'm committed. Like, we say that our school is a family, and it really is. I mean, if you're sending your 5th, 6th grade child off to a school, they better feel like it's family and want to be here. So not everybody could do this, but I happen to love it. I love the international aspect. We have domestic students, we have local students. We've got everybody here.
I agree. It's not for everybody, but I hope that people would consider it because it sounds like in many respects, that family aspect, it really does make it all the more important. I can't ignore the fact that you are incredibly invested in your state organization. And I'm especially fascinated because CASL, with the Connecticut Association of School Librarians, your leadership is organized around 2-year stints, whereas many of my, Michigan state leadership, and I know other state leadership around the United States, those are 1-year stints, and it might be a 3-year path. But could you spell out a little bit more about where you are and how Connecticut has your state leadership organized? Because I think it's really unique.
It works really well for me. I've been a part of CASL since I've been a librarian. So 2007, 2008, I remember volunteering at a conference and getting my feet wet. But you can start off as the VP intern. That's how I started, vice president intern. And that's 2 years. And then after you do those 2 years, you move up to vice president. So that's currently, I'm starting my first year as vice president. So 2 years, and then you move up to become president for 2 years. And we've got a phenomenal in Connecticut. I just love our board. We're such a good team. And, you know, we all have busy lives, right? It's volunteer, but we're passionate about what we do. And, you know, something work related or family related comes up, I've got you, right? We all work hard together, volunteer hard together. We've got each other's back. So people that are listening, if you know Barbara Johnson, she's past president. And then Melissa Tom is our immediate past president. And Jenny Lucier is our current president. And we just pulled in, we're so excited. We've got Kelly Suma, who's a brand new librarian, an incredible teacher, but she just went through an advanced or the alternate route to certification in Connecticut. And so we pulled her in and she's expecting a baby. And yet she is so excited to be a part of the Castle board. And it's really like we spent a lot of time, Kelly and I, talking about and let her know that, you know what, if you feel like you're a brand new mama, like it's okay. We'll get somebody else. But she really wants to. She's passionate librarian. And I said, you're going to get so much from the Connecticut Association of School Librarians that, I mean, we just had a makerspace program that we did, Esther, with Barb Johnson. So there you go.
So I'm thinking listeners are hearing a 2-year obligation for each of these steps. And the upside of that has to be that you really do get a good sense of the responsibilities that you have and how to carry those out because you have 2 years at the job rather than just one.
Right, because at 1 year, you've just gotten your feet wet and you're still, and that's why I love that VP intern too, because I was the same way that Kelly feels right now. I'm clueless, right? So, but I'm attending these meetings and each time I'm learning a little more and I'm learning more people in Connecticut. And we've got a great support system too, you know, our board members and, you know, there's people out there that are incredible librarians. And they have so much experience. So, you know, the 2 years is wonderful. It really is.
And the last question I'm going to ask about this, because somebody wants to know. Oftentimes, those sort of rising presidents or VPs are the chairperson of their state conference. So they have to chair 2 state conferences? How do you do your state conference?
No, it doesn't mean that at all because the conference committee is, you know, certainly our board members are a part of that committee, but we can have someone else. So when I was the VP intern, I was the chair of our conference and it was great. And I still had all of the experience and support of Barb Johnson and Melissa Tom. So it's really, and again, we are very supportive of one another. And so if I had stuff going on in work or my personal life, I didn't have to do that as VP intern. So there's a lot of flexibility in Connecticut the way our organization is set up. So you're not running it for 2 years. And our conference is every other year. And we also have a nerd camp that we're trying to do off, you know, so that'll be in the springtime.
I love that. It's an elegant solution. Valerie and I, we're talking at the end of the summer, and the fantastic thing is that you and I had an opportunity to cross paths twice in person this summer, which is just unbelievable. At the ALA's annual conference in Chicago at the beginning of July, and then the third week of July, you and I met again in person in Rome. But the reality is that through the benefit of social media, it is the reason why you and I actually first met in February of 2021. As adults and school librarians, we have always recognized social media for good. But when I think about our students, I'm not convinced that social media has always been a good influence in their lives. And a reason why I'm so glad that you're here to share this conversation with listeners today.
Yes. So that's really the title of the presentation that I did at IASL was Social Media Rewired for Good with a question mark. And it's totally a play on the words. Are we rewired forever? Is it for good? Is it for bad? And Amy, every time I hear your podcast or see you, I remember the moment when we met virtually. And it's really because of social media, because I read a tweet from some librarian friend, or that the New Jersey Association of School Librarians was having a virtual free online conference in February of 2021. It was a Saturday, and I signed up for that. And who was the keynote speaker? But you, Amy, and podcasting. And you were so passionate and inspirational. And then later, and the way they had that conference set up was with those 8-minute lightning sessions. So I remember going to a session, it was 8 minutes to learn how to podcast. It was a Saturday in February, and it was Samantha Bonha. I hope I'm saying her name correctly. And she introduced me to Anchor. And the next day, I recorded my first podcast. And I was just playing around with it, seeing what I could do. So that's where we first met, Amy. And it was because I read a tweet on Twitter that I knew about that conference. And so there you go. That's social media for good right there.
Well, and friends, I know there's somebody in the audience going, it's called X now.
Yeah, I know it's X. I know it's X, yeah. But it was Twitter at the time when we met.
I'm like, you cannot undo, simply by changing the name, changing the ownership of this platform. I'm not ready to disband and walk away from the place formerly known as Twitter. Mm-hmm. And I have too many relationships. I have too many, professional relationships with people I have met exclusively. And again, until this summer, you and I were just people who exchanged, messages on Twitter. So I'm not ready to walk away from all of those relationships that I feel have been cultivated over years. And done so because we are both invested very much in the profession that we feel strongly about. So I want to make sure that we sort of take this conversation and apply social media and what it means in the lives of our students, because I don't think we can ignore the fact that they are very different in a very different place in their lives. And therefore, social media is going to have a very different impact on their lives in a radically different way than it is an impact on my life. So when I think about presenting at a conference, and you and I have been so fortunate this summer to have opportunities to attend these conferences, what I'm going to present always weighs very heavily on me. I always want to make sure I come up with content that is worth sharing, something that's going to benefit my audience. I know you're very similar in that respect. What inspired you to take this particular deep dive into social media and looking about how it impacts our students?
So it was actually a book, surprisingly, not surprisingly, The Chaos Machine, the inside story of how social media rewired our minds and our world, written by Max Fisher. And actually, it was a colleague who wanted to read this book and offered it, and it was shared, whoever wanted to join this book club. And so I said, oh yeah, I ordered that book. I'm going to read that book. And it was, as I was reading through it, it's an incredible piece of research. And I recommend anyone who's listening to, if you've got some time and the interest, read it. Because Max Fisher, this is so well researched and documented and written. It's incredible. And the end notes, there's, 40, 50 pages of end notes. So his international reporting is just phenomenal. And his look at YouTube and Twitter and Facebook are the three platforms he really looks at. But when I was through reading this book, I was stunned. I was shocked. I needed to talk about this book with other people. And it just so happened that the IASL conference was announced, and I was like, I think there's something I want to do with this, because I want to talk to other librarians from all over the world. I mean, what an incredible place to have librarians from every continent, where we could find out and we could talk about, like, well, what are your students doing, and what are they using, and how are they using it, and what are you doing? And so I knew it had to happen, and then I started gathering resources, and that's why, Amy, as you say, I hope people look in the show notes, because the link is in there, and there's so much in there, and there's things that will help you in your libraries, tomorrow are in there. And again, as a pre-K through grade 9 librarian, I'm always thinking about, and I'm even with my pre-K kids, my kindergarten kids, I'm thinking about, how can I model use of social media? How can I model, being a good digital citizen? How can I show them that we can use this stuff? It's in our lives. So let's use it for good. And so, it was really that book that inspired this whole thing. And then as you start thinking about something, you get all kinds of other things that, come across your internet.
Well, and I was sitting in this conversation. I attended your session when we were in Rome. And I got to be honest, friends, a couple things, first of all, came to mind, because when I attend sessions, selfishly in the back of my mind, I'm going, this should be an episode. So it's very self-serving. Just on the surface level, let's just be very vulnerable and very honest. And I'm a vulture. So I will come to a session with the full intention of then saying, let's make this into an episode. I got to enjoy your presentation because I'm physically here at IASL, but I know an entire listening audience who is not here today, who could benefit from all the work. And let's be honest, friends, anytime you as a school librarian or as an educator invest your blood, sweat, and tears into a presentation, because you do, it becomes very encompassing. You sort of all encompassing. You sit there and you think about it all the time until it sort of is fully hatched and it's out in a place where you can sort of share it with the world. But to go through that and only have the immediate recipients of that, the immediate beneficiaries of Val's work, were the people in that room, sitting there in that room in Rome on that day. And as a podcaster, I will simply say, we got to do this when we get home. And I don't know if I pounced on you at that time. I don't know if I said, hey, guess what? I think we need to record this as an episode. But that's what's going through my mind at the time. Couple more things. First of all, you put that picture of that book in your presentation, and I practically leaped out of my chair because I'm like, I bought that. I've got 2 copies that are going out to my students in the fall and to my staff members, and I cannot wait to share it. So I was very excited about that. So, and friends, obviously, when you look in the show notes today, you're going to find all of the things that Val talks about and her presentation, as if, sir, you were in that audience with her in Rome when she presented it, but you now have the benefit of looking at that whole presentation and all the resources in it in our show notes. Friends, if you are audiobook fiends like me, I've already got this book on hold through Libby/Overdrive, and it is a 16-hour listen. I'm not sure what that translates into when you bump it up to 1.25, but and sometimes I go up to 1.5, but it depends on the content. So yes, there's something for everybody in the show notes today, friends. So Val, thank you so much for selfishly putting this all together and then letting us put this out into the world. Let's talk about what you want in the way of takeaways, because I think we're always thinking about our audience and what they consume from what we put out there into the world. What are the kinds of things you're hoping the school librarians tuning in today will take away, not only from our conversation, but also this presentation, which you have generously shared with us?
So I think one of the most important takeaways is we as school librarians have a really important job. And that is just to communicate with our students and talk to them and share with them and listen to them. And so that together we can work through this social media creation and AI and whatever else, because this technology is here, and we know so much about brain science now too, and how children's brains work and adolescents' brains work, young adults' brains work. And we know how they're wired, and we know about the dopamine hits and all of that. And don't we as adults, we love those dopamine hits too. I mean, when I drove into work today, like I just driving, I get dopamine hits coming to work, and that may sound weird, but it's great. Like, so I think, a takeaway is, and this probably comes from, and I'll probably mention this again, the Social Institute, Laura Tierney. I heard her speak many years ago. I think it was 2019, 18 maybe. And she does such a phenomenal job of listening to students and including students in the conversation. And that's what I try to do as much as possible, because I want to be young, but I'm not. I can be young at heart, right? And so it's so important that we listen to students, And I guess if I could just throw in a couple, when we first started talking in the session, we were talking about like our thoughts about social media. And, so I remember Gina said, well, social media is either the devil or a blessing, right? And isn't it? Anna had said that it's a battleground between parents and kids, right? You, Amy, had said that it's not a digital footprint anymore. It's a digital tattoo. And, and again, these are things that just stick in my brain. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to talk to my kids about it's a digital tattoo. So, those are just some takeaways. But really, if you've got the time and the interest, read Max Fisher's book, because it's just a great piece of writing. And it also talks to the essential fact of we've got to make sure that the information that we're reading is true and accurate and documented and isn't just somebody saying something without any backbone. So research is important and navigating our way through. And that's where we as librarians, together with our students and our teachers, navigating this really complex world that we're in.
Well, and I think I when I consider like my job and what I do, and I'm teaching older students, but it really doesn't matter. This really boils down to looking at the human relationships that we develop with our students, because we are and should be an important influence on their development as educators. So it doesn't matter if you're school librarians or you're educators in their lives, but as the human factor in a life that also has that digital component, because they do have lives outside of school, and oftentimes what they see on their screen, they're building those relationships with the people. I don't want to call them parasocial relationships, but they have these relationships with the people they engage with online. But then they have the people they engage with in person. And I think we all discovered this, that when we had to move to a remote engagement with our students, we did our best to humanize those Zoom conference calls, because we wanted our students to feel like they were engaging with us as people. And the fact is that when we all went back to teaching in person, we now had a better chance of being that, sort of in-person influence on our students, because when they are engaging with social media, it is obviously very in their face. It's on a screen, it's in their ears, And it's so easy for them to develop those parasocial relationships with whoever it is they follow on TikTok, whoever they follow on YouTube, or on whatever social media platform they engage in. But as the human person, as the person in front of them, we have this opportunity to create some hopefully some positive habits for them when it comes to things like consuming social media. How do you compartmentalize that? How do they have social media as a place where they can really sort of internalize some of that, understand it, but also still be their authentic selves?
So you're reminding me that, again, I'm going to go, well, I guess it's common sense media. There's some information in the slides. And they do a nice job talking about, you could restrict and you could say no, right? You could block, you could filter, you could do all these things to try to regulate and control what our students are hearing, seeing, right? But the really the best thing that we can do, because they're going to get around the filters, right? Is again, and it takes more than one lesson. It takes more than just listening to the school librarian. It takes the whole community, the whole village, however you want to say it, of conversations about this stuff. So, do you really want to spend 4 hours really, playing that? Like, and again, they're the ones we're trying to raise independent learners, independent human beings who eventually one day they will be independent, hopefully. They're going to be making these decisions. And I also think it's kind of interesting that there's been this little movement recently that some 20-something-year-olds are going back to using flip phones. But so it's out there. And I was just talking to at the Makerspace event the other day, or no, we were having lunch. It was lunch the other day on Monday. We Connecticut librarians get together. And someone was saying how her 20-something-year-olds, they wanted to go to the bookstore first when they're on vacation to buy books. And so they were all reading their books and weren't communicating with one another. They were on their books. But, books hit you in a different way. You connect with them in a different way than scrolling endlessly through the loop. And because I have students pre-K through 9th grade, right? I mean, I do really simple, I teach copyright to pre-K and kindergartners. We write a poem together. They write a poem. And I do the C with the circle around it. And I explain to them, could somebody else walk in here and steal that poem that we just wrote? No. That's what copyright is. We own the rights to that. So at a very simple, basic level, we can teach these important skills to kids. And I'll have 4th graders, 5th graders that are in my library, and they're talking about, oh, Mrs. DiLorenzo, I know my cousin did, and this happened, and I'm never going to do that, And then they go into the upper school, and something changes, right? So even though when they were with me in 4th and 5th grade, and then as developmentally, right, now it's more like I want to fit in. So I just think it's continual communication.
Well, and that continuity of service, like you said, because I talk to librarians who've had the benefit of being in the same space to see a graduating class come through, to see them from when they were little until they graduated and be like, I've known these kids since they were 5. And that is really powerful, because when you get somebody like us in the position that we hold, who recognize the value of building those relationships and making sure that social media is something that is always part of the lessons that we are giving to our students in terms of digital literacy and that messaging that we have. Our students are always going to benefit from that. And I think we have to just remember that we have this opportunity, this absolute gift that we can then hopefully translate to our students for however long they are our students. As with so much that's online these days, algorithms are busy at work. In the bingo card of digital literacy, algorithms is crossed off very quickly. In what way has the reality of algorithms really factored into what you do when you think about social media and your students?
So it's important that students, I think most of them know what algorithms are, but it's important that they know what they are and how they work. And thinking about, and this comes through with a reading of Max Fisher's book, that the people behind these social media platforms, right, they're there to make money. They're there to get you to look at advertisements. And they use these algorithms to feed you content. So I could be a 14-year-old girl looking for a healthy spinach recipe. And then all of a sudden, they know that I'm 14, and all of a sudden they start sending me some, not to bash any platforms, but, YouTube videos about girls that are super, super skinny. And then I start questioning, maybe my body isn't thin enough, or whatever, right? Maybe I'm not pretty enough. Maybe I'm not right. And so, again, it's all those algorithms are created to get more hits, to bring more traffic to their platforms. So it's important that students know that.
When I was both in your presentation in Rome, and then when I had the opportunity to really go through your presentation, in a more, sort of friends, like when you come back from the conference and you've kept links to all of the presentations you've attended because you're so generous in sharing it. And, I got to sort of think about these ideas at greater length. What came up to mind was this confirmation bias, and how algorithms have a way of feeding us what we think we want to see. And you can at the same time both generate activists, when I think about student activism, which has been fueled by algorithms, those same algorithms can turn people into conspiracy theorists. You've got something that has the potential to do an amazing thing, in that is create activism and this passion for movements and for causes which otherwise would not necessarily cross our feed. But it's the same calculation, this algorithm that will also feed people some very disturbing messages and things which that could go sideways very quickly, that could go awry. You've got people who are fueled by this algorithms which feed them, in many cases, very scary or negative ideas which create fear and bigotry.
And again, in this book, you will come across what happened in Myanmar, in Sri Lanka, and in our own country, right, with the political divide. I mean, that all happened because, right, a pandemic and these algorithms, these social media platforms, and so the political divide is unlike anything we've ever seen, and it's because of these algorithms. And on the one hand, the people in charge of these platforms have said, kind of laissez-faire, leave it. Like people, well, that's fine until, like you said, you start, I might be looking for some political party, and then all of a sudden I start getting more and more, and it starts affecting the way I think because it's feeding me very biased material. And I'm like, and it's that confirmation bias, right? And so we all have to be aware of that. We need to understand it. It's important for us, again, as librarians, to try to teach students how to find two sides, right? Not just one side.
Well, and I think about how social media can be both a megaphone for something and a magnifying glass.
Yes.
In that you hear messaging and it sometimes, and because of the algorithms, it becomes pervasive, and you're hearing this message amplified in a way that perhaps would not get the kind of attention. I'm thinking about Judy Blume, because Judy Blume keynoted at ALA in Chicago, and she said, my books were banned in the 80s. People just didn't know it. And it was like, you're right, because my God, I read Judy Blume. I read Judy Blume in the 70s, friends. I read Judy Blume in the 80s. Did I have any inkling that anybody objected to these books? Absolutely not, because there wasn't social media amplifying
Right.
one person's objection, two people's objections. And so it is in that respect a megaphone, but social media also provides us that magnifying glass to be able to see issues not only in real time, but from all angles. You think about when somebody, puts something on their phone, I'm thinking about the violence that sometimes gets captured on civilians' phones, people who are just taking video images with their phones. All of a sudden, we're going to see something happen from all different angles. And while it's wonderful, you also have to contextualize it. You have to recognize and put it in a larger space. So, but I just don't think our students are equipped to do that as young people.
And we also have to talk to them about etiquette, right? Just because we can't see the person on the other side doesn't mean we can treat them any differently than if they were face to face with us. So, again, it's just, how do we treat other human beings, right? With kindness and respect. And we can certainly disagree with one another, but do we need to, yell? Do we need to scream? No, we can disagree. And that's completely fine. But what we just need to continue to work with students and adults for that matter, is just healthy discussion and respectful listening to one another.
Well, and I think we've already started to talk about this, but, I feel as an adult and a non-digital native that the reality of social media and the impact that it's had on my life is vastly different from that of my students. They are 100% digital natives now, who have never known a life without the presence of social media. And I keep on thinking, and I was thinking this during the presentation that you were giving, what can we as school librarians do to help our students? And I think you've started to talk already about some of the things that we need to be teaching our students. And the reality is our students aren't too young to hear about this. There was a time when I was teaching and I was working with littles when our students weren't old enough to be on a certain platform. And when I taught littles, it's like, oh, you don't need to talk about this with them because they can't be on those platforms yet. Well, that's garbage. That's garbage. You cannot simply look at the age at which a student can be on a platform and assume they're not on that platform because they're too young, or what parent would give their child, what parent would give a kindergartner a phone? Well, a lot of parents.
They are. So you're right. It is never too young. And that term digital native. This is what I think. Are we all born knowing how to read? No, we aren't, right? We learn how to read. So I look at being, digital native the same way. We aren't all born knowing how to be digital users, sharers of content, listeners of content. And so it is so essential, even with our littlest kids, our pre-K kids, in my school, like, we can have these conversations in a very basic way, but it is all around them. They see their parents on their phones and listen. It is essential that we start young so that they're hearing it, because like I said, I get to see these kids at different ages. I get to see them when they're in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, even 9th grade. And I can see, and I'm like, I remember this child when he or she was, 8 or 10 or 8, and it's just, again, it's those human connections that are just essential. And we need to teach them, just like we teach them to read, just like we teach them to write. We need to teach them how to use this really powerful technology, because anybody can say anything and publish it anywhere.
Absolutely. I'm really grateful that we have this opportunity to really sort of think about this as the school year for so many of us is getting started, because it really should be something that we build into our lessons You've done a spectacular job of researching. I'm embarrassed when I think about my own presentation that I did at IASL. I'm like, look at all this research, and then you documented it. It was fantastic. Listeners are going to love the resources that you've included in today's show notes. Would you give us a sense of some of the resources which you feel have been really helpful in your pursuit of providing these sort of guardrails and generating these sort of opportunities to teach? This is a digital literacy that needs to be included in what we do with our students. What are some things that you came across that you will use and have used when you're working with your students when it comes to the resources that you shared in our show notes?
Yeah, I'm a big resources person, right? And as a librarian, and I just start delving into stuff and find more and more. Oh gosh, of course, I mentioned the Social Institute already, and that comes up again first and foremost in my mind. It's so important to include the students in these conversations, and that's what Laura Tierney does so well.
Can I also mention, I was absolutely, I actually had to stop the video to make time for this recording, but you included some video links, and one of them was from PBS. And I'm thinking, that was a fantastic video that you provided. And sometimes I forget that PBS has all of these fantastic teacher resources. And it was sort of my note to self. I'm like, I have got to remember as the school year starts to make a bigger deal out of the PBS platform, which is designed with teachers in mind.
And I don't know. I'm just always collecting stuff. So yeah, there's links to Time articles.
Friends, I'm going to encourage you to take a look at this presentation because, there's a great deal of research which has been cited and examples which Val has put in to each of these slides. And it really does deserve a deep dive, which is why I'm glad we're having this conversation. Do make sure that you take a look at it because, again, whenever somebody decides they want to present on a topic, the kind of work that they do to create a presentation is exactly what we do to put together an episode. And so for listeners who are tuning in right now, if you're thinking, maybe this is the year that I reach out to Amy and I'd like to do an episode with her, I'm going to tell you right now, when you think about the kind of thought process that goes into presenting a topic to an audience, it is the same thing that we do to put together an episode. So that's just a little selfish promotion there. Sorry, Val. But I want to make sure that anybody who's listening right now says, if this is the year that I maybe would like to be on Amy's show and do an episode, think about the kinds of things that you would put together for a presentation of your peers. And just know that's exactly what we do to get ready for a podcast. And then, oh, by the way, be ready to share all those resources like Val has. I really appreciate it. Val, you've included in your show notes, and I love these video clips, but the one I watched was on PBS. You've also done one on The Daily Show. And I'm grateful you did this because it was a very frank conversation on toxic masculinity. And especially because Andrew Tate was in the news so much this past year. And I really think that this sort of is an important reminder to us that many of our young men and boys are taking in a great deal of messaging coming from people like Andrew Tate, who might skew their perspective of what I want to say healthy relationships involve and how we in general function as a society when the glorification of this male sort of prototype is so easily found anywhere you look on social media.
So instead, we need to do our best to show students positive role models. So like your Keanu Reeves of the world, right? Who are positive role models because they can be just as exciting. But if all that they're seeing is, the one that you just mentioned, right? They're not, and all he cares about is making money for himself and getting hits. And, there's a purpose, right? When people share information online. And so who our kids are watching and what they're watching is really important. So they might need some guidance.
Well, and perhaps that reminder of ultimately, what is their goal? Like, what is their goal? How is it that their platform generates money? Because I think that is an important reminder when I think about who comes up as being some of the most popular videos on YouTube. Val, I can't let you go without asking another question. I noticed in your presentation another book that I just bought 2 of for my collection, and that is called Braiding Sweetgrass for Young Adults. And friends, for my audio files out there, for my friends who love their audiobooks, this is an 8-hour listen available on Libby and Overdrive. But let me ask you, because I think it'll help sort of bring this all together. What was it about this book, Braiding Sweetgrass for Young Adults, do you feel was relevant to this conversation about social media in our young people's lives?
So I, like you and many of the other listeners, I really like technology a lot. In recent years, I've pulled away from it a bit because when I came to my school, we didn't have much. I've been here since 2010. We didn't have too much technology, believe it or not. But as I've been here, technology has exploded, and we have plenty of technology, like so many other places that are fortunate, right, to have the resources. But I felt the importance to make eye contact with students and to move a bit away from technology so that we can communicate face to face and really listen to one another. So when I recently read Braiding Sweetgrass, the young adult version, and met Monique Graysmith at ALA, right, and have pictures with her. So I just feel like it's important to have a balance. So there's so much good that can come out of technology and does come out of technology. And yet, at the heart of who we are as human beings, it's connecting with one another. It's learning from, it's listening to, it's laughing with, it's crying with. And so Braiding Sweetgrass for me, it just reminded me that it's so important to reconnect with our earth and appreciate all that it does. So yes, technology is a part of our world, and I love it. And it allows us, Amy, you and me, right, to meet. And then we had, but it wasn't it great to meet face to face, right, in person at ALA and out in Rome. So I don't know. I guess just balance, right? Social media can be an incredible thing to connect, to learn from. It can also be debilitating. And so I think that, as always, we are human beings. We're meant to connect, right, with each other, whether it's over a platform or in person. And I like social media. I try to just use it as much for good as possible.
Val DiLorenzo, you are fantastic and the perfect messenger for us to get motivated. The school year is right around the corner for many of us if we haven't already started our school year. I am so grateful that you are here, and you and I are part of each other's PLN. But I know that there are listeners who would love to include you in their PLN. Would you let us know how our listeners can connect with you? Because, truly, you have offered us some great information to build into our personal practice. But I know listeners would love to not only take advantage of the presentation, which you've so generously shared, but also to make sure that we are reminded of all the things that you are doing throughout the year. Let us know how we can find you.
Well, on Facebook at val.dilorenzo, DiLorenzo. Let's see. You can always email me at school. I use that email all the time. So VDILORENZO @Rumsey RUMSEYHALL.org. What else is out there? Instagram, it's turbobks, TURBOB, as in boy, K as in kite, S as in Sam. That's an old handle, like from way back. I can't even remember when that was. It was so old. I used to be a turbo kick instructor, so that's where the turbo came from. And BKS, of course, is short for books, because I'm a librarian. So,
and then on X/Twitter.
That is Val DiLorenzo.
Absolutely. You are wonderful. I hope you have a great rest of the summer. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you, Amy. It's been a pleasure talking to you and meeting with you and connecting with you.
Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
As with all the episodes which are being recorded and shared out over the summer months, I am grateful to Val and to all my guests whose generosity of their time and talents made these episodes possible. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider sending some fan mail to Val and adding her to your virtual PLN. The topic of our next episode will be on censorship and my conversation with James LaRue. I hope you will tune in.